Hello everyone, and welcome to my CBS Wonderful Today channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The pressure in Genoa City reached a fever pitch as Jill Abbott, long the dame of the Abbott conglomerate, faced the most harrowing moment of her life, knowing that time was slipping down and that the trueness she had carried for decades could no longer remain buried. In the dim light of her private study, girdled by the familiar trappings of her continuance of ambition, power, and particular triumphs and tragedies, Jill summoned Cain Ashby, whose fidelity and love had been tested innumerous times, yet who had remained a steady presence in her life, to hear 3 exposures that would ever alter the geography of the Abbott family and the future of Billy's heritage, a disclosure that promised to shoot shockwaves through both the boardroom and the family dining room. The first secret Jill disclosed was a long-concealed legal initiative she had executed times prior, a list clause bedded in the family trust that, unknown to Billy, effectively barred him from inheriting any of the Abbott fortune unless specific conditions, numerous of which were insolvable to meet without her knowledge, were satisfied, a clause Jill had shielded with scrupulous perfection while scuffling with the moral counter-accusations of leaving her grandson financially disenfranchised yet defended from the family power struggles that so frequently entangled the Abbott men and women, leaving Cain stunned, scuffling with both his grief at witnessing Jill's declining health and the weight of responsibility now placed exactly on his shoulders. The alternate disclosure, indeed more ruinous, involved the complications of a business reproach from decades before, one that Jill had uncovered involving Victor Newman's subtle manipulations and commercial influence, which had led to minor but consequential lapses for Abbott Enterprises, and Jill confessed that her silence had been strategic, designed to shield the company from public embarrassment while contemporaneously maintaining her position of influence within Genoa City's nobility circles, a move that meant Billy's claims to leadership and equity in the family company were now contingent on our evaluation of his character and his capability to navigate the unfaithful waters of commercial politics without the guidance of a dame whose wisdom had long been undervalued. The third secret, maybe the most particular and emotionally charged, revolved around the history of the Abbott family itself, including exposures about retired alliances, backstabbings, and romantic snares that had shaped the veritably fabric of the family, and Jill, with an admixture of anguish and determination, revealed to Cain the verity about her own opinions to manipulate certain issues to cover those she loved, a concession that painted Billy not as a careless grandson but as a youthful man caught in the crossfire of a heritage he could neither control nor completely comprehend, leaving Cain torn between his duty to recognize Jill's final wishes and his desire to shield Billy from heartache and loss, all while the murk of Genoa City's history and present schemers impended large, including Victor, Nikki, Phyllis, and Ashley, each of whom had their own stakes in the outgrowth and whose responses to Jill's exposures promised to enkindle new battles and test old commitment. As Jill's condition worsened, the urgency of her exposures counted heavily on Cain, who now set up himself navigating a maze of moral, fiscal, and domestic scores, forced to decide whether to uphold Jill's precisely orchestrated plan to exclude Billy's heritage rights or to intermediate to save the heritage of love and family that Jill had fought so hard to cover, a dilemma complicated further by the knowledge that Victor Newman, ever the opportunist, would seize any weakness as influence to expand his own conglomerate, and that Phyllis Summers, with her unyielding ambition and complex history with both Billy and Cain, could exploit this fermentation to further her own docket, potentially undermining everything Jill had worked to guard, while Ashley Abbott, whose judgment had frequently been clouded by emotion but whose fidelity remained loyal, would probably offer counsel that could either alleviate or complicate the unfolding extremity, leaving Cain to weigh not only legal and fiscal ramifications but the profound emotional consequences for the Abbott family, including Abby, who had always respected her grandmother's strength and stressed the destabilization this disclosure could beget in her own connections, particularly as she navigated the challenges of raising her children in a megacity replete with secrets and shifting alliances, and Tracy, whose perspective on justice and family honor could either support Cain's adherence to Jill's wishes or challenge it, forcing him into the most excruciating ethical decision of his life, all while Jill, with a fragile smile and a hint of relief that her trueness were eventually laid bare, reminded Cain that her love for the family had no way wavered, that her manipulations had always been driven by a desire to cover rather than discipline, and that the ultimate responsibility for shaping the future now rested with him, a burden both heavy and sacred, As Genoa City braced for the fate of her death, a waterfall of shock, heartache, power struggles, and exposures that would ripple through the corridors of Abbott, Chancellor Park, and every corner of the megacity, ever-altering connections, alliances, and the veritably understanding of who the Abbotts were, as whispers of Jill's secrets spread through the elite social circles, drawing in intelligences, attorneys, and opportunists likewise, all eager to uncover the full story and stake their claim in the preceding chaos, while Kane, scuffling with grief, fidelity, and moral duty, prepared to execute Jill's final instructions, knowing that every decision he made in the coming days would define not only the fate of Billy's heritage but the heritage of the Abbott family itself, and that the megacity's most important players would be watching nearly, ready to hurdle on any misstep, as Jill's last breath marked the end of an period and the morning of a new chapter filled with conspiracy, query, and the ever-present drama that had come to define life in Genoa City. As Kane absorbed the graveness of Jill's exposures, the air in her study sounded to cake with the weight of decades of secrets, backstabbings, and calculated opinions, the walls themselves acting to bear substantiation to the innumerous choices that had shaped not only Jill's life but the lives of everyone tied to the Abbott name. Every corner of the room was steeped in history, from the pictures of once Abbotts whose stoic faces suggested both pride and silent judgment, to the shelves, lined with awards, contracts, and legal documents that quietly told Jill's battles in boardrooms and in family controversies likewise, reminding Kane that the woman before him had been both protection and strategist, able of maneuvering through the complicated corridors of power in Genoa City while icing her family surfaced, if not unscathed, also flexible, and yet now, facing mortality, Jill's vulnerability was palpable, her hands pulsing slightly as she gripped the edge of her office, a subtle earthquake that spoke volumes to Kane, who understood the implied urgency behind every word, every vacillation, and every precisely measured pause. Indeed, as Jill's eyes glistered with gashes, she radiated a quiet strength, the type that had allowed her to survive commercial wars, family backstabbings, and romantic dolor that would have crushed a lower soul, and Kane, feeling the immense responsibility of being the last confidant to bear substantiation to her trueness, felt a admixture of reverence, grief, and dread, knowing that Jill's final act, revealing these secrets, was not simply a transfer of information but a deliberate shaping of the future, a final unity designed to test the character of those left before and to review the heritage of the Abbott conglomerate. The first secret, the legal initiative that stripped Billy of immediate heritage rights, had consequences far beyond fiscal control, for it touched upon deeply particular connections, kindling questions about trust, favoritism, and the moral math Jill had employed in her continuance, leaving Kane to contemplate how Billy would respond when the news inescapably reached him, knowing that his grandson's sense of annuity and pride might collide with the reality of being fairly cut out of the conglomerate he'd grown over awaiting to inherit, and that such a disclosure would ripple outward, affecting not only Billy's relations with Kane and the remaining family but also his romantic snares, Gemütlichkeit, and indeed his alliances within the commercial world, where perceived weakness could invite opportunists like Victor Newman to exploit vulnerabilities for particular gain. Speaking of Victor, his shadow impended large over the unfolding drama, for the cunning Napoleon had long viewed the Abbotts as both rivals and pawns, and Jill's death coupled with Kane's newfound knowledge of the three explosive secrets presented a chessboard that Victor couldn't ignore, egging him to subtly maneuver behind the scenes, testing commitment, planting dubieties, and transferring discreet dispatches to those most likely to act in his favor, including Nikki, whose emotional intelligence and deep connection to both families made her a wildcard in the coming power struggles, able of either diffusing pressure with her ingrained sense of compassion or inflaming conflict with her defensive instincts. Meanwhile, Phyllis Summers, who had always held an uncanny capability to smell both occasion and weakness, would really whiff out the cracks created by Jill's exposures, situating herself to influence Billy's unforeseen disenfranchisement for either particular or professional gain, potentially orchestrating boardroom pushes at Abbott or manipulating romantic snares to secure influence, all while maintaining a veneer of concern and fellowship that masked her advised intentions, leaving Kane to navigate a minefield where any misstep could spark cascading consequences, both emotionally and financially. As Kane scuffled with the counter-accusations of Jill's first secret, he turned his attention to the alternate, the decades-old commercial reproach involving Victor's manipulations, realizing that the exposure not only explained past lapses for Abbott Enterprises but also illuminated vulnerabilities that could be exploited in the present, from strategic business opinions to implicit combinations, accessions, or hostile appropriations, and Kane knew he'd need to approach every concession, every meeting, and every family discussion with extreme caution, balancing fidelity to Jill's memory with the realistic necessity of guarding the company and its workers, including pious directors and long-term mates who had invested their trust and careers in the Abbott name, all while anticipating that Victor, Phyllis, and other opportunists would seek to twist the narrative for maximum advantage, maybe indeed dragging innocent parties into conflicts they were ill-equipped to handle. The third secret, embedded in the veritably fabric of the Abbott family's history, brought with it the heaviest emotional weight, revealing retired alliances, long-buried backstabbings, and the implied provocations behind Jill's once conduct, and as Kane heeded, the layers of family dynamics, intertwined loves, and old grievances unfolded like a shade. Intricate and pictorial, making it clear that Jill's strategic mind had always been a mix of protection, manipulation, and foresight, a combination that had assured the survival of the Abbotts through heads that gauged generations, and yet, with her passing imminent, the burden of maintaining that delicate balance now rested exactly on Kane's shoulders, challenging him to interpret her intentions directly, anticipate the responses of the family, and make opinions that recognized both Jill's heritage and the future of Genoa City's most influential menage. As the news began to circulate within the family and elect associates, Abby's response was immediate and visceral. Her admiration for her grandmother's strength now mingled with a deep-seated fear for the stability of the family she loved, and as she considered the counter-accusations for her own children, she realized that the reverberations of Jill's exposures would extend beyond fiscal considerations, shaping the emotional geography in ways that could alter connections permanently, from trust between siblings to romantic connections and indeed Gemütlichkeit that had preliminarily been taken for granted. Tracy, ever attuned to the balance between justice and fidelity, countered in with perspectives that challenged Kane to consider not only the legitimacy of Jill's pushes but also the ethical and emotional consequences, forcing him to navigate a complex moral terrain where every choice could be scanned by those who had their own interests at heart, and where the line between doing what was fairly correct and what was innocently right came decreasingly blurred. Meanwhile, Victor, seeing an opening, subtly tested Billy's responses, planting seeds of mistrustfulness about Kane's judgment, Jill's intentions, and indeed the fidelity of those closest to him, knowing that if he could produce enough pressure and query, he could potentially manipulate the unfolding events to serve his own interests, whether through commercial maneuvering, public perception, or domestic influence, all while maintaining the guise of concerned oversight. Phyllis, not to be beaten, read every response, every vacillation, and every commerce with a calculating eye, preparing to act at the moment when occasion presented itself, whether through public exposure, legal maneuvering, or emotional influence, icing that her influence would remain inarguable, and that the fallout from Jill's exposures could serve to elevate her position within both the family and the business, all while keeping her motives incompletely concealed to save the element of surprise. As the days unfolded, Kane faced a grim series of challenges, from managing the immediate shock endured by Billy, who oscillated between wrathfulness, confusion, and grief, to addressing the subtle power plays of Victor, Phyllis, and Nikki, to considering the long-term counter-accusations for Abbott Enterprises, whose board and workers were now operating under the shadow of query, with rumors, enterprise, and rumored alliances hanging to destabilize the veritably foundation of the company, all while Kane himself grappled with the emotional weight of Jill's death, the responsibility of recognizing her final wishes, and the pressure of being the sole keeper of knowledge that could review the Abbott heritage. Abby and Tracy handed counsel, but their perceptivity frequently reflected particular impulses, histories, and emotional investments, taking Kane to precisely filter advice, weigh provocations, and anticipate consequences, understanding that every decision he made in the coming days could either recognize Jill's scrupulous planning or inadvertently undermine it, creating ripple goods that would resonate through the family, the business, and the broader Genoa City community. At the same time, whispers of Jill's secrets began to blunder into social circles, with intelligences, attorneys, and opportunists eager to uncover the full story, creating an atmosphere of pressure and expectation. as everyone from media outlets to commercial rivals sought to understand the counter-accusations of the Abbott dame's final exposures, and to determine where they might place themselves to benefit from the bull of SMR, leaving Kane to navigate not only the internal dynamics of his family and the company but also the external pressures of public perception, character operation, and the strategic considerations of challenges like Newman Enterprises. As he worked lifelessly to stabilize the situation, Kane also had to manage the particular fallout for Billy, whose sense of treason and confusion was compounded by grief, forcing Kane to act as both middleman and protection, rephrasing Jill's intentions into conduct that could save connections while recognizing the legal and ethical confines of her last wishes, and trying to prepare Billy for a future in which he'd have to assert his own agency, independence, and adaptability, without counting on the fiscal safety net that had long defined his prospects. Throughout it all, the ever-present specter of Victor Newman served as a constant memorial that Genoa City's balance of power was no way stationary, that every move could be combated, abused, or exploited, and that Kane's capability to navigate these unfaithful waters would define not only the fate of the Abbott family but the broader dynamics of the megacity itself. As alliances shifted, commitment were tested, and the true nature of power, influence, and heritage came into sharp relief. Indeed, as Jill's end marked the end of one chapter, it contemporaneously burned in numerous others, setting in stir a waterfall of events, schemes, and emotional paroxysms that would dominate Genoa City in the days, weeks, and months to come, each disclosure, each decision, and each commerce carrying the eventuality to reshape connections, review authority, and challenge the moral and ethical boundaries of everyone involved, leaving Kane, and the rest of the Abbott family, to navigate a geography converted by verity, loss, and the grim complexity of mortal ambition, love, and fidelity, in a megacity where secrets were currency, and where every heart, every mind, and every decision could cock the scales between triumph and catastrophe. And as the murk of Jill's secrets stretched across boardrooms, dining apartments, and intimate family spaces, it came decreasingly clear that the dame's final act hadn't only readdressed heritage but had irrevocably altered the emotional and strategic dynamics of the Abbott family and all of Genoa City, leaving Kane to carry the weight of her heritage with courage, wisdom, and an unyielding commitment to the woman who had trusted him with her deepest trueness, knowing that the consequences of her exposures would echo for generations, challenging everyone to defy their solicitations, fears, and commitment in ways they had no way imagined, and icing that Jill Abbott's presence, influence, and strategic brilliance would remain a defining force in the lives of her family and the megacity she had so indelibly shaped. Indeed, as Kane scuffled with the immediate fallout of Jill's exposures, the fabric of Genoa City itself sounded to shift beneath the weight of secrets and the pledge of Bull of SMR, with every road, office, and private hearthstone echoing with whispers of Jill's final admissions. Lily Winters, who had long walked a precarious line between fidelity to her own family and the Abbotts, set up herself drawn into the whirlpool, her heart torn between compassion for Billy and the practical necessity of supporting Kane in conserving the heritage Jill had entrusted to him, and yet indeed Lily, whose judgment was generally guided by principle and instinct, couldn't anticipate the emotional storms that would waterfall through her own life as she came a middleman, confidant, and occasionally reticent strategist, trying to shield Devon and their children from the chaos while defying the consummation that Genoa City's nobility frequently applied secrets as munitions more potent than any legal contract or boardroom initiative. Devon Winters, ever the defensive father and married mate, honored the volatility of the situation and the eventuality for desolation if Jill's exposures came public or were misinterpreted, and so he moved with both urgency and care, coordinating with Lily, consulting discreetly with Kane, and trying to anticipate how the megacity's web of alliances, including Victor's implacable opportunism, Phyllis's advised interventions, and Nikki's moral influence, might cross with the Abbott drama to produce new heads, all while balancing his own moral compass, maternal instincts, and desire to cover Summer and their children from the collateral damage of commercial and family conflicts that had long defined life in Genoa City. Mariah Copeland, whose history with the Winters family was deeply entwined with both fidelity and heartache, came a vital figure as well, navigating the pressure between her bond with Abby, her mindfulness of the Abbott-Newman power struggles, and her own intentions and emotional stakes, knowing that every choice she made could either stabilize the family or inadvertently complicate the unfolding fermentation, especially given her understanding of how secrets, when revealed at the wrong moment, could enkindle conflicts that no bone anticipated, and her instinct to act decisively placed her in positions of both occasion and threat, where her empathy, intelligence, and courage would be tested against the megacity's grim drift of ambition and manipulation. Summer Newman, recently navigating the complications of her own connections and the heritage of both the Newman and Abbott families, was caught in the crossfire emotionally and strategically, as Jill's exposures hovered to reshape not only Billy's heritage but the subtle dynamics of trust, fidelity, and ambition that had long governed relations among the youngish generation, forcing Summer to defy questions of particular ethics, family constancy, and the blurred lines between love, obligation, and the pursuit of one's own future. Indeed, as the grown-ups around her maneuvered with experience and subtle cunning to save influence, power, and character, the consequences of Jill's final exposures gurgled beyond the immediate family, touching boardrooms, media outlets,